Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. We have Kenneth Allen, Director of the UF Department of Emergency Management, who's going to talk to us about personal and work preparedness, being a UF Hurricane Pro. So really quickly before we get started, this webinar is being recorded and will be uploaded to our YouTube channel. Please make sure your microphone is muted to avoid interruptions. If you have any questions, you can post them in the chat. There's also a Q&A panel in the menu, so if you want to ask a question anonymously, you can do it that way. If you need captions or transcription, on the menu at the bottom, you have a button that says More. You can click on that and enable the captions that way. Otherwise, Kenneth, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Patricia. And excited to be here. Appreciate the opportunity. I'm very grateful everybody on this call would either give up their Friday lunch or at least share it with me as if you're sitting at your desk eating. So grateful to have some time with you today and talk about preparedness both in our work roles at the university, but also in our personal life. And going through the chat, we've got everybody that's been in Florida for over 50 years to people this is their first hurricane season. So obviously we have a wide group of people. Hopefully everybody can take something away from this presentation, the people that have been here for decades. Many of this might be review, but hopefully that's an opportunity to at least find something new, but also just a reminder that we all need to continue our preparedness. And certainly for the people, this is their first or second season. Hopefully we'll give you the core knowledge. And if you have questions, feel free to ask those. I'll stop a couple of times during the presentation, but at any time, feel free to post something in chat. I want to make sure I'm answering your questions, or if I say something that's not clear or that, I want to make sure you're taking away the information, getting your questions answered. So this is a graphic those that have been in Florida for a while have certainly seen. This just maps out the number of hurricanes and tropical storms over about the last 60 years or so. And you can see where we're at going into July and that huge mountain that's ahead of us. And if you've been here for a few years, you know, really once we get into about the middle of August through about the middle of October, that's when we're in that peak of hurricane season. That's when we're likely to see impacts. Doesn't mean we haven't had storms earlier, certainly have had storms later than that. But that's really when we want to focus our preparedness. We want to make sure people are ready for that, both at work and at home. Oftentimes you'll see in the emergency management community, messages start getting cranked out June 1st. My concern with that has always been, and then there's often kind of a lag then until we get a storm and people think, this season was a bust or nothing happened or this or that. So a lot from our department, we continue to push out information not only at the beginning of hurricane season, but all the way through. And especially as the fall semester comes back and more students are on campus as we get to the beginning of August, really start pushing out more information then as we get into that peak of the hurricane season. So far, we've already had one tropical storm, Arthur, which went into East Texas, Louisiana border area. I think may have only been a tropical storm for about 12 hours or so. But you can see the rest of the names there for the season as we work our way through it. This got some media attention at the end of May. We'll look at a couple of slides on the predictions for this hurricane season and the caveats there, but this is the official prediction from the federal government from NOAA. They like to hedge their bets, so they don't give a straight definitive answer. They give a range. And you can see on the left side of the slide, a 55% chance of a below normal season, which is certainly good news for us, and then 35% of near normal, but only about 10% chance of this being an above normal season. A normal season now is 14 named storms. Of those 14, 7 of those being hurricanes, and of those 7, 3 to 4 being major hurricane, a major hurricane being a category 3, 4, or 5. So you can see the federal government's prediction from NOAA is really in line with other predictions. This graph at the bottom, you see different weather organizations and then what their prediction is. When you see a dot, it means they are just giving a number. If you see a range or indicating a range at the top, this would be an above normal season, a near normal season, and a below normal season. You can see almost all of those colored dots and ranges are falling within either the normal or many of them, probably the majority of them, actually showing a below normal season, with the average prediction on all of those being about 5 hurricanes and obviously more tropical storms than that, but about 5 hurricanes. The thing about those, and those are fun to look at, and we always look at that, but it really doesn't change our preparedness for anything. We've seen storms where we've had, or seasons where we've had incredibly active hurricane seasons, named storms, all of those, but none of those making landfall in the US. And we've had the reverse of that, where we've had very below normal seasons, but yet having some devastating impact. A common example of that that's often given is 1992, where you had an extremely slow season in terms of number of storms, but one of those being Hurricane Andrew, which led to dramatic changes in the state of Florida from emergency management to the implementation of a statewide building code and lots of other things. But if you think about that, that was the A named storm not occurring until almost Labor Day. And I think there were only 4 or 6 named storms that whole season. So it's really not how active the entire Atlantic basin is, but about obviously the impacts to us. This is just to look at last hurricane season, which was a nice break from what we had really over about the last decade or more, really almost to 2 decades, going back at least the last decade and a half. Prevailing winds that pushed almost all of the tracks out into the open Atlantic. We did have one tropical storm make landfall in the Carolinas. And then, unfortunately, a very devastating Hurricane Melissa, Category 5, making landfall in Jamaica, on the west side there, and doing other damage to other parts of the Caribbean. But otherwise, for Florida, was certainly a good season. I like to look back over the last 10 years and whether or not the university has had to close. So this takes us back through 2016, and you can see the dates of when the university closure was and what the storm was. So you can see, yet last year, certainly it was a great break. Before that, the only other year within the last decade that the university didn't have to close and make preparations for a hurricane or a tropical storm was in 2018. And if you think back to that graph that we looked at, the bell curve of when storms occur, most of our closures have been in that September, October range. But you can see as early as July 7th of 2021 with Delta and as late as November 12th in 2020 with Hurricane Eta there. But the majority of those, like I said, have fallen either that late August, September, October period. Hopefully we get another break like 2025. But if not, we want to continue to be prepared, and we want to make sure our preparedness is not about just the individual hurricane season, but we're continuing to prepare every year and continuing our preparedness efforts and maintaining that. Next few slides, I just wanted to go through and find where can you get this information? Whether you've been here a long time or not, where are the places to go and get the information? One source that's not used as much, but it looks like if you're trying to look, are we expecting development over the next 2 to 3 weeks? This is from the Weather Prediction Center, Patricia, or drop that link in the chat. There's also a QR code to take you to that. This is issued every Tuesday, and you can see at the top, it gives you a week 2. So it's not looking at the current week we're in, but it's looking ahead 2 weeks and then looking ahead 3 weeks. This is from the one that came out this Tuesday. So the good news is not looking like tropical development over the next 2 weeks. When there is a chance, and you can almost see it in that the lower corner of the week 2 graphic, there'll be a hatched area showing chances of development. Now, certainly we have storms sometimes develop that aren't on here, but it's a great way to be looking ahead and thinking about, are there chances of having a storm or not? This isn't going to show you a track. It's not going to show you definitively, but give you an idea of what areas are favorable for development. Then as we're within a week, hopefully everybody is looking at the National Hurricane Center, and that link will be dropped in chat as well. On their main page at hurricanes.gov, it's going to give you a 7-day outlook and a 2-day outlook. And those are going to show you areas that the Hurricane Center is expecting or has the potential to develop. And they will have those colored based upon, is it a small chance, medium chance, or a high chance of development. And they update that multiple times a day. It'll show you the location of the low, and then it'll draw a circle or other type of shape on there indicating where that low is going to move. That does not always correspond to where the track of the hurricane is going to be, or the track of the tropical cyclone, I should say, if it's a depression or a storm, but give you an idea of where that low is moving and where they expect development of that storm to occur. Then once we have a storm, the National Hurricane Center is going to issue advisory products on any active cyclone, whether it's a tropical depression, tropical storm, or hurricane. Again, if you've been in Florida, you're used to seeing those, but I did want to walk through what all of these products are very briefly. And all of these products come out 4 times a day. If there's an active storm, they're released at 5 a.m., 11 a.m., 5 p.m., and 11 p.m. So if you're trying to get the latest forecast, those are when they are released from the National Hurricane Center, and they release all of these products. So on the left side, the storm surge risk, thankfully, if you're in Gainesville on main campus, we're not having to deal with that. But certainly if you have interest on the coast, or UF certainly has locations on the coast, you'll be able to see, is there a storm surge watch or warning? And then specifically, what height of storm surge and feet are they expecting and is being forecast? Then in the middle is the forecast error cone that everybody is used to seeing. I did want to talk about specifically what that means, because often when we ask people, what does that really mean? Get all types of answers. The white cone you see there is obviously the 5-day forecast track, but that cone represents the forecast error, and that is the average error over the last 5 years. And it is the 67th percentile, is what they refer to it mathematically, but meaning 2/3 of the time, the center of that storm will be within that cone. 1/3 of the time, the center is out. That cone does not depict potential impacts from the storm, anything like that. The cone is only depicting where they are forecasting the center of the cyclone to move, with the error on either side of that, if that makes sense. What's new this year, if you see the state of Florida with the colors in the middle, it will include local watches and warnings that are being issued by the National Weather Service. In the past, it only included coastal watches or warnings. And this graphic you can see, and you'll see others that are more dramatic, you see watches and warnings well outside the cone. And that was a concern from the National Hurricane Center, is that people were focused on the cone, not so much where the watches or warnings are. And on the right side is the wind risk and timing. That'll be issued as well. Those are important to look at because that shows they're issued both for tropical storm winds and hurricane force winds. And then the graphic depicts what is the probability of an area receiving either tropical storm force winds or hurricane force winds. And then they issue the most likely arrival times as well as earliest reasonable arrival times. We usually focus on the most likely arrival times. If you have a storm where the forecast is very uncertain, it's probably good to use earliest reasonable arrival. The most likely arrival time indicates when is the time that tropical storm force winds will occur for that area to begin. And we want to make sure both at the university and at home, all of our preparedness actions are completed, that we have our home ready to weather the storm by the arrival of tropical storm force winds, which are 39 miles per hour and above. hurricane force winds are 74 miles per hour and above. But once we reach sustained tropical storm force winds, it is best to be hunkered down, not driving around, doing any kind of traveling, be where you're going to be for the duration of the storm. So that's why it's important to understand when are we expecting the arrival of those winds. This year, I did just want to mention that. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but they are, in addition to the standard cone, going to begin issuing an experimental cone, which goes from the 67th percentile, meaning 2/3 of the time, the center is within the forecast error cone, to moving to the 90th percentile, meaning 9 out of 10 times the center of the storm is going to be within the forecast error. They're also going from an absolute error, giving us a perfect circle, to looking at the error both along the track and cross track, meaning distance from the track left or right. That's where you start to see more ovals as well. So we'll see what that looks like. It's going to be issued experimentally alongside the standard track. So we'll see what that looks like this year. And then additionally, the National Hurricane Center is going to be issuing lots of products. And for our area, National Weather Service Jacksonville serves campus. So they're the ones that issue all of our watches and warnings for Alachua County. So if Alachua County is under a tropical storm watch or warning or a hurricane watch or warning, that's coming from the National Weather Service Jacksonville. So Patricia will drop that link in there. That's a key bookmark to have. Is continue to make sure we're reading and understanding the guidance coming out of the National Weather Service Jacksonville. They're going to issue these hurricane threat graphics as well, which are great to look at. This is an example from Hurricane Milton a couple of years ago, but it breaks it down by threat. Rather than that forecast error cone that's just giving us where the hurricane is traveling, this gives us each of the threats. What is our wind threat? What is our rainfall threat? And what is our tornado threat? Obviously, they're showing a surge threat for coastal areas as well. But for us in Gainesville, what is our wind threat, rainfall threat, and tornado threats? Those are things we're going to be focusing on as an institution, making preparedness actions, but also what we need to be focused on in our own lives for our homes and our families as well. And they're updating those multiple times a day if a storm is threatening our area. So that's a great place to go and get all of that consolidated information. So what will we be doing from our department? What's the university doing? So anytime any portion of the state of Florida is within that 5-day forecast error cone, or there are tropical watches and warnings for a portion of the state, we're going to begin sending briefings out to what's called our emergency operations team, deans, and others. But also strategic communications marketing is going to begin posting information on the UF homepage. So there'll normally be a banner on the UF homepage. Click on that. You'll be getting updated information from the university. Our department as well is going to be on daily coordination calls with the state's Division of Emergency Management and the National Hurricane Center, as well as on daily forecast briefing calls with the National Weather Service in Jacksonville. We want to make sure we're getting that information directly from the forecasters, and that's what we're basing our information on. If there are going to be potential impacts for the UF campus, we're going to work with our emergency operations team, activate the university's emergency operations center, and certainly work closely with our partners in the city and county at Santa Fe College and others to, as much as possible, have coordinated decisions, actions, and responses across the community. So before we go into what we should be doing to prepare during hurricane season, I did want to pause and see if anybody had questions on anything I covered or about hurricane forecasts, where to get information, anything I went over that may not have been clear.
Any questions? Nope, I'm not seeing any
All right.
questions yet.
Perfect. Well, if you have some, again, feel free to ping me, put those in chat. What I wanted to do for the rest of the presentation is really focus on what has become our kind of message from our department that you're always hearing us push, which is when it comes to tropical weather and hurricanes, have a plan, build a kit, and stay informed. And we're going to look at each of these at work and at home as well. So if we start with having a plan in your office, in your department, really encourage you to capture successes of what worked well and what are things we can do better within our units. So talking to people that were here during 2024 and the earlier storms before that, and then update your emergency plans and checklists. Over this decade, most areas have really fine-tuned how they're going to go through a closure, what they need to do before, during, and after a hurricane. But when we've had a lull like we had last year, not having one, and if we go through more seasons without them, um, I've been a UF over 20 years, and when we've had those breaks and then we have a storm, sometimes departments forget all of the information or they've had turnover and it's like going through the process again. And so what we want to do is people maintain that readiness. So encourage you in your staff meetings, those times to have conversations to make sure everybody's aware of their responsibilities, what it's going to look like internally in your unit if the university were to close. And if there are things you need to do, if people say, hey, last time in 2023, 2024, this didn't work out or this wasn't communicated well, make sure you're improving those things and working through that. And also making sure your area is designated essential employees if needed, and that those employees understand their roles and responsibilities. And we're going to look at that on the next slide. But that's often a question that comes up from departments on both sides is, what are the purpose of essential employees? Do we have them? Do we not have them? Am I one? Am I not one? Because that's what's going to go out in the UF alert message during a closure is for essential employees to check with their supervisors. So making sure we have that clarified within our units is key. And then at home, if you are an essential employee and you may have to work during a storm, making sure you're especially taking precautions to make sure your family, your loved ones are taken care of so you can fulfill that role. Uh, but whether or not you have that role, also thinking through your plan of, are you going to stay in your residence during a storm, your home, your apartment, whatever it may be? And most people in Gainesville and Alachua County are. But if you happen to be in manufactured housing or a flood-prone area, making sure you understand what are you going to do during a storm? What are those arrangements? Making sure everybody in your household understands that and is prepared for that. For essential employees, I left a link to the policy there, but you can go to the UF website, search essential employees. It'll easily come up. Essential employees are those individuals who may be required to report to work or be on call. Colleges and departments are responsible for identifying essential employees and notifying those individuals. If it's the first time, usually they're sent a letter. They don't have to be sent a letter every year, but if in your plan or in your operations you have essential employees designated, please make sure they're being informed. If you are an essential employee, making sure you understand your role, that you've talked with your supervisor about that. Oftentimes, there's kind of this idea if essential employees are the people who are going to ride out the storm on campus. And that is true for some people, but there are also people who are not going to be on here during a hurricane, but there are things to do after the closure, but while it's still safe to be on campus. So if it's a weekend, the university is closed for Monday, you may have people that need to come in, making sure the final arrangements are done within your building, within your unit. So those are technically essential employees or may need to come in after the storm to get things ready for everyone else coming in. And sometimes we don't think about them, those being essential employees, but it is anybody who has a role during a university closure really needs to be an essential employee. And there are three categories now. It's on-campus essential, meaning they need to come to campus during a closure, or another UF property, even if it's not main campus, or remote essential, that they have a responsibility to carry out during a closure remotely. These may be things like approving time, payroll, whatever it may be. In today's world, we're kind of all doing things at home and after hours, and we may not think about, well, if the university's closed, making sure whoever needs to still continue those business processes or whatever it may be, that if that's the expectation, they need to be designated as essential, and that protects both the department and the person as well. Did want to touch on sheltering because we often get questions on that. UF will open shelters if needed for a hurricane. Those are intended for UF affiliates and their families. So students, faculty, staff, and their families. Everything is maintained and run by UF departments. These are not Red Cross shelters or Alachua County shelters. These are University of Florida shelters maintained and staffed by the university. This reduces the burden on the county. There are some universities out there that simply force everybody into county shelters and move that burden over there. We want to be a good partner with the county and not burden them. So that's why we have our own sheltering. If you're as old as me, you may remember a show called The Love Boat. Many of you probably will not, but we like to say the shelters are a lifeboat, not the love boat, meaning it is to get you through the storm. It is not meant to be luxurious. We certainly work hard to make sure they're safe, sanitary, and secure, but you are sleeping on the ground. You have to bring your own bedding and those things. So if you have another arrangement to stay with family or friends, again, if you're in that manufactured housing, flood-prone areas, and you have an opportunity to go somewhere else, I would encourage you to do that. But if you don't have that option, we do have that available on campus. Students are going to stay in their residence. Again, most people in Alachua County are going to stay in their home or their apartment, whatever it may be. But we do have this option. Or if you have employees that need to be on campus working during a storm and they would feel more comfortable if their family was on campus as well, their family could go to the shelter. I do like to point out, especially for the folks that are new to Florida or new to the area that may have moved here from a coastal area in Florida, Alachua County does not have evacuation zones. Those are for coastal communities and coastal counties. So there is not a situation where Zone A from Alachua County is going to be evacuated or things like that. The areas in Alachua County are flood-prone areas, and again, the manufactured homes. So UF does not, we kind of refer to UF closing, but that really means UF is canceling classes, closing offices. It's never a situation where no one is on campus. On-campus students will generally stay here. Many will choose to leave. But the residence halls, the graduate and family housing is not closed. Obviously, Shands Hospital continues their operations, but in storm mode. There are other key functions across this institution that have to continue. So it is not the situation where campus, when we say closed, everyone's leaving. Oftentimes, when that gets communicated out, I'll get calls from parents who are in another state or another part of the country, and they think it means we're forcing everyone out or things like that, and that is certainly not the case. Vehicles, if you have university vehicles, we encourage you to maintain them at half a tank of fuel throughout the season, so everybody doesn't go the day before the storm, deplete and drain all of the university's fuel reserves. So it would encourage you, if you don't need to fill up your vehicle, probably not a rush to do it, but at least keep half a tank throughout hurricane season. And then when the university is closing offices, that if you're able to move your university vehicle to be protected and you're not always able, good spaces would be interior sections of parking garages once parking is lifted. But again, those can fill up quickly. If you're not able to get in a parking garage, encourage you, park it away from trees, certainly out of flood-prone parking lots. And there are fewer and fewer of those on campus. But if you know your parking lot is going to flood, we'd encourage you to get it to a higher ground or a lot that doesn't flood, not under trees when possible. And then make sure everybody is aware of where the vehicles got moved to, where the keys are on that. So before I move on to having an emergency kit, any questions on having a plan?
Are your shelters open to animals?
Unfortunately, not. We're trying to work through that with VetMed. So service animals, yes. We'll always make accommodations for that. But at this time, no, you would have to go to a pet-friendly shelter within the county or make arrangements for someone to care for your pet or boarding your pet. So we're trying to solve that. It is not easy to solve for a variety of reasons, but we are trying to get there.
Is it okay for me to park my car, like a personal car, in one of the UF parking lots during a hurricane?
Um, it- there's an official answer and an unofficial answer. I would say that's not the guidance because we're trying to reserve those for university vehicles. But once parking enforcement is being pulled, then it's pulled and there's no one enforcing that. And that's why they do fill up because many students, employees will move their cars to a garage. So technically you're allowed to do that, but that's not the official messaging from the university.
Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Good questions. Yeah, appreciate the questions on that. So we're looking at building a kit, and I would encourage you not just for hurricanes, but you really have this year round, especially in your home. So on the workplace side, if you do have essential employees who are riding out the storm, that you're making arrangements for them in terms of food and water, that may be complex, not complex, but you may be going to the point of working with Gator Dining to make sure you're having a stockpile of food or some way that they can safely deliver food or have food stockpiled before the storm and afterwards, and that they have an appropriate location to be during the storm and any additional supplies they're going to need. At home, encourage all of us to have 3 days worth of supplies. The state is going to message 7 days. I would 100% agree with that, but when you're taking someone who has no supplies and you're telling them they need 7 days worth of supplies, usually their eyes glaze over and it's just hard to get there. So what we've tried to say is at a minimum, really have at least 3 days as your bare minimum and go from there. And customize that to your needs and preferences. You know, what we say is eat what you store what you eat. So like in my house, everybody eats peanut butter. So what we try to do is always have one of the large peanut butter jars open, and then we have one that's unopened. And then, when we finish one, we open the other and buy another one. Um, that's a tremendous, if you buy the large jar, that's a tremendous amount of sandwiches you can make. And it's very easy to keep a loaf of bread in the freezer and then cycle that through as well as you need that. That gets you along the way of that 3 days. But if you hate peanut butter, would never eat it, that's not an option. Find an option that would work for you, whether that's protein bars, whether that's canned tuna, canned chicken, something that you could prepare without electricity that would be very easy, a variety that you and those in your household are going to eat. And the idea being, then you just rotate that through your normal supply, your normal pantry, so you're not having to spend money on this extra 3 days or extra 7 days worth of food. You're just giving yourself extra supply, a little extra margin. Because what you don't want to do, and we show a picture on the next slide of a grocery store, is try to get to the grocery store and everything stripped away. There's obviously going to be a push to get supplies immediately before a storm. So everything you can do to at least make sure you have those core supplies taken care of is going to be helpful. Obviously, remember your pets, they're going to need 3 days or 7 days or whatever it may be, dog food or cat food or whatever type of pet you may have, as well as any other needs. You really want to customize that to the needs of you and your family. So this is a picture I took years ago. This is Millhopper Publix on 16th Avenue, 23rd Avenue there that I took prior to a storm. And we've seen this happen for several storms. So again, making sure you have those things and trying to make arrangements to do it for water. What we usually tell people is, save a few empty soda bottles, or right now, if you can go to a store and buy a gallon of water, for $1 or $1.50. Great to have several of those on hand. Again, you could rotate them through, or if they're empty, just keep the clean, empty bottles And then you can fill those immediately before a storm, and you're not having to buy several cases of bottled water when it's very hard to find. The shelf-stable food we talked about. I would encourage everybody to have a battery-powered radio as well. Those have largely disappeared from people's households. Again, if you're as old as me, when I grew up, you would go into everyone's house, they would all have a battery-powered small radio. Um, Very few people are listening to radio anymore outside their car, even in their car, certainly in their house. So many people will not have those. However, those are really key if we have power outages, disruptions to your internet or cable. It's a great way to stay informed and get information, including from the university. So I would encourage everybody to invest in an inexpensive battery-powered radio. Obviously, things like flashlight, extra batteries, first aid, any toiletry or special items that you're going to need. Make sure you're safeguarding any important documents, like your insurance papers, those things. In case your home was damaged, you can quickly get to those or have copies somewhere else. I would encourage you to have some cash available. I'm as guilty as everyone of going around without any cash because we live in a very electronic world. But again, if we had large scale power outages, which thankfully we haven't seen the last few years, you may have storms that are unable to take credit or debit cards or Apple Pay or whatever it may be. So having at least some cash on hand if you did need to buy some supplies after the storm. Your pets that we talked about, a great idea to have a portable charger. You can now get the USB chargers very inexpensively. Many people already have those. Make sure they're charged before the storm so you have several cycles that you can charge your cell phone and other things. This is available on our website, and Patricia posted that at Get Ready, Build a Kit. This checklist you can download, help you get through that. The overall Get Ready link will take you to everything we're going through, having a plan, building a kit, staying informed. This image is from last year, but it used to be every year until last year, there would be sales tax on these types of items, batteries, radios, all of those things, and we would promote it. There would be a couple of weeks a year that it was tax-free within the state of Florida. The good news is all of these preparedness items are now permanently year-round tax-free in the state of Florida, which is great. Obviously, the food is already tax-free. So the good news is all of these items, at least you're not having to pay tax on. Any questions about emergency kits, things to go in them?
Not an emergency kit, but somebody asked us for the shelter, other than ID, do you need other documents to enter the UF shelter?
No, so great question. You don't, and most people are going to have their ID on the phone. Now, if you've lost your ID, we still have ways to get you in. So if you are a UF affiliate, you would just come in. We have a kiosk. You would tap your phone or scan your ID, and then you would, if you have other family members with you, you would enter their information as well. And then everybody is armband. The reason for that is the safety of everyone. We want to know who's in the shelters, especially if they're not a UF affiliate and those things, since we're going to have students in there and others.
Wendy asked if you could explain the difference between hurricane watch and hurricane warning.
Yeah, thank you, Wendy. I should have put that in the presentation. That's a great point. So a hurricane watch means conditions are expected, maybe expected for 48 hours from now. So you'll normally see a watch issued 48 hours out that conditions are possible, I should say. I think I said expected. Conditions are possible. And then when it goes to a warning, that's usually within 36 hours, those conditions are expected. We can also see a situation, and I think this may have happened in 2024, and I have to go back and look, where we could be under a warning and a watch. So, for example, we may be under a tropical storm warning because tropical storm conditions are expected, and then they may have a hurricane watch additionally because we may have gusts up to hurricane strength. we wouldn't be under like a hurricane watch and a hurricane warning at the same time, but we may be under a tropical storm warning and a hurricane watch at the same time. Uh, in Alachua County, those are now issued on the west side and the east side, divided by I-75. So we could have a situation where maybe, depending on the coast, the hurricane was making landfall. There's a hurricane watch on one side or the other of the interstate, and then a tropical storm warning for the entire county. And those are important. Normally, if the university is going to be under a tropical storm warning or higher, uh, we're normally going to cancel classes and close offices to do those. So the watch indicates those conditions may occur. It's for a longer time. A warning means those conditions are expected, and it's going to be a shorter time, meaning those conditions are expected within 36 hours or less. Good stuff. So moving to stay informed, the last part of that, having a plan, building a kit, and then staying informed. Talked about some of this. I'm going to go through some slides and some QR codes to help with these others, but really would want everybody on the university, but certainly people on this call, to have the Gator Safe app and the Florida Storms app on your phone. And I'm going to show a QR code and what those do. Also encourage you strongly to make sure your UF Alert contact information is up to date and that you're confirmed that you've joined the Gainesville location. And I have a slide showing that, but sometimes people think they're subscribed to Gainesville and they're not, or maybe they have an older number in there. And on the workplace side, make sure you're looking at the UF homepage, you're following that guidance. And also be aware of those National Weather Service Jacksonville forecasts that we've talked about. Everybody on this call is probably high speed and is already doing that. But sometimes I'll talk with especially parents or sometimes even employees who are maybe focusing on what they're seeing from an out of area market that we often get. They may be watching Orlando or listening or watching to Orlando media or even parents in other parts of the state. And the conditions there, or the expected conditions, may vary greatly. 50 miles or certainly 100 miles can make a difference, dramatic difference on the conditions we're expecting. So making sure you're looking at what are the forecast conditions for campus and for Gainesville, and you're aware of those. And at home, understanding local watches and warnings that Wendy just talked about, making sure you understand when we're going to be in those conditions. When is the expected arrival of those tropical storm force winds so we can be prepared? How much rain are we expecting? What's the tornado threat? We talked about having a radio. College of Journalism also has a new service called Beacon that you can listen to on 89.1. Day to day, I think you have to go to the HD channel 4 if you have HD radio channels in your car. But during a storm, they will move that over to one of the main channels. That's a service that just continues to provide updated information from local jurisdictions, the university, and others, as well as their team and the Florida Public Radio Emergency Network will be pushing out updated forecast, those things. So that's why that battery powered radio, I think, is so important, because if you do lose internet, if you do lose power, you're still able to get the latest information. And we're very fortunate here at the University of Florida that there are radio stations on campus. The College of Journalism does an amazing job with the weather resources of putting out news and information. So some important social media follows. I would encourage you on all your platforms to be following UF Public Safety, Alachua County Emergency Management, National Weather Service Jacksonville and Florida Storms, which is the College of Journalism. You can search for those accounts on X, on Facebook, most of them also on Instagram. I'll give a plug to the county, Alachua County Emergency Management, and Director Grice does a great job of pushing out videos during hurricanes, updates, and those things. So it's a great way to make sure you're getting the latest information from the community. And then obviously on the UF public safety side, getting information from the university. The Gator Safe app. So this is where I would encourage you, if you don't have the Gator Safe app, take out your phone, scan that QR code. It'll take you to that website, and you can scroll down and either go to the App Store or the Google Play Store. It's an amazing website or amazing app, excuse me, not just for hurricanes, but it gives you a mobile blue light feature. You can chat with the UPD dispatcher 24/7. There are friend walks, take action guidance. But for hurricane season, there's links on there to weather, other things. We actually need to get some hurricane links on a banner there this month as well. But a great resource to have. And then the Florida Storms app, that is also from the College of Journalism, so a free plug for them. That is a free app that will give you radar and lightning data, which and local forecasts, which is useful any day, especially like today. If you are on campus and the thunderstorm rolled through, it'll send you watches and warnings for the hurricane season. It will give you the National Hurricane Center track. It will also give you the model tracks if you're interested in following those. So it's a great resource. Daily, you can set a location and turn on notifications, and it will send you a notification if a watch or a warning, such as a severe thunderstorm warning, hurricane warning, tornado warning is issued for that location, or you can have it follow you wherever you're at. I use it to always get the alerts if there's something going on in campus, as well as my home in Gainesville. And I have parents in their 80s that live in Alabama, so I've dropped a pin on their house, and that way I can get alerts for them and check on them if there's severe weather is going on. So a really great resource. And then UF Alert, I mentioned this. After this, would strongly encourage everyone to go to one.ufl.edu, the one.uf interface, sign in. You'll see the profile icon in the upper right. Click on that. Go to view and update profile information, and then scroll down to where it shows your UF Alert subscription information. Make sure Gainesville is checked, or I would encourage you to make sure Gainesville is checked, and it will show you what text number the UF Alerts are going for, and make sure that number is correct. If not, update it. And all of that information is at the website, the UF Alert website, ufalert.ufl.edu. And Wendy mentioned not going out after the damage. I'm going to hit that in these last couple of slides on department planning. Just a couple I wanted to go through about resources if you are working to update your emergency plan. So that link, I didn't unfortunately get it to Patricia, but if you go to the emergency management website and look for university planning, it'll take you to that website. There is a departmental planning template. You can download that. Appendix B is the tropical weather plan, but also there are attachment sections that walk through a closure checklist and other things if you need to update your departmental emergency plan. Also be thinking about if your department has critical functions that you're able to continue those. And thanks, Patricia, for grabbing that website and putting it up. You know, as an institution, we want to make sure we're continuing those critical services, we're taking care of and meeting those key needs. So if that impacts your department, we talked about essential employees, making sure those people are able to do it, that you have a plan to do it. If you do have to maintain critical functions, remember safety is key. Those employees need a safe place to be to ride out the storm. And afterwards, as Wendy posted in chat, they need to be careful going out. We could have power lines down around the community. There could be flooding, other things. So making sure people are safe and always, but especially if you do have essential employees on campus that are having to maintain a function. And for everyone, including people maintaining critical functions, we want to make sure they have a safe place to go and they're suspending operations once sustained winds are above 39 miles per hour or tropical storm force. So even UPD will suspend their patrols, their responses once we start having sustained tropical storm force winds. And then post-storm damage assessment. So if you come back to campus, you see anything dangerous or a life safety situation, obviously call 911. But if you come back and your building has water intrusion or whatever the case may be that is not dangerous or life-threatening, you're going to contact your appropriate work management center. For most people, that's going to be facility services, but it may be IFAS housing, whatever it is, you're going to contact your appropriate work management center. Encourage you to take pictures of the damage if possible. And then in addition to your work management center, also notify EH&S Risk Management or whoever your appropriate insurer is to making sure they're aware of the damage and the insurance process is beginning for the university. And if there are things you can do to prevent others from being harmed, whether that's blocking off an area from your building, placing barricade tapes, putting up out of order signs, whatever it may be, so people aren't walking into damaged areas. Obviously, don't ever do anything that's going to put yourself or others in danger. So if you show up and your building looks like it's not safe to go in, and thankfully that hasn't been the case uh, for a really long time, you don't want to go in. That's a situation you call 911. So don't ever enter buildings, areas, flooded streets, anything you think might be unsafe. Do not put yourself in danger, even if you're carrying out a critical function. And if you would like help developing your departmental emergency plan, a little bit of a commercial for you. We run that January through December. We have about 5 to 10 colleges that go through monthly meetings and then work between those meetings to update their emergency plan based on that template that I linked earlier. It is a commitment. You do have to work. It's not just showing up to the meetings, but if you're interested in that, we'd love to have you in the 2027 cohort. We're already halfway through this year's. But if you either reach out to my email or reach out to emergencymanagement@ufl.edu, indicate you're interested in the cohort or have questions about it, glad to explain that in more detail or talk with you more about that. So any final question, anything I hit or didn't address, or you have questions about?
Let's see. If we have an office with a window, should we unplug all cables and cover the computers, furniture, etc.?
What our guidance is on that is I would ask you to confirm that now with your local IT, because some of the IT areas have different guidance. If you can do anything to mitigate that damage and move things away from the window, things like that, or if you're in a building or a lower level of a building that sometimes will get water intrusion and flood, making sure your computer, if you have like a desktop, is off the ground, those things. But it's tough to give the exact answer across the whole institution. So please work with your IT on whether they want you to unplug it, leave it on, move it to a central area, whatever it may be.
How best should we interact with local city, etc., for storm-related things like down trees or power outage reporting? Should I prioritize communicating quickly or waiting before reporting?
No, I would report those as soon as possible. So if it's a down tree that's blocking a road or something like that, you can call 911. If you're in Alachua County, the non-emergency number is, I think it's still 955-1818. I would double check that 911 goes to the same place. I should have it written down, but I think it's 352-955-1818. I need to verify that. And so they do want reports of that. For power outage, you would report that to your power provider. The number is on, let me pull a number to our hurricane survival guide really quickly because we have the GRU number on that. Let me pull that in on post. But if you're on Clay Electric, someone else, reports of down power lines or power outages, go to your power provider, but trees down that are blocking roads, things like that, you would call 911. And then in the county EOC, they're working to track those and dispatch those. So I would not wait to report that as long as you can do so safely from wherever you're riding out the storm at. Working to post the Hurricane Survival Guide. That will take you to the brochure that has those numbers. We're in the process of updating those. But the GRU power outage number is 352-334-2871. And that's on the brochure as well.
Okay. For those of us in other counties, do we get UF alerts for our respective areas?
For the larger areas like UF Scripps, Lake Nona, Jacksonville, but for IFAS areas, not currently. There's
So I
something
guess,
we're working through. Sorry, Patricia.
no, go ahead.
I would say for all of the areas outside of Alachua County, um, the guidance is to close when local governments close, not local schools, because it may be during the summer or some other time. But if county government is closing, the UF facilities in those counties will close. IFAS is very good at that and will follow that closely. All facilities in Alachua County will follow the main campus closure. Lake Nona, which is near the Orlando airport, will follow the UCF closures.
And I take it your supervisor in your area will let you know what alert you'll get and things like that.
Yes, they have separate ways to communicate for those, for the IFAS facilities to RECs, other areas. And I would bring up those questions now. I would be asking your dean or director of making sure who is making the closure decision, making sure they're in line with closing when the county government does and how that's going to be communicated out. And those are the types of things we talk about and work through during the planning cohort as well.
And the last question I see is is it really necessary to fill up your bathtub with water before a storm? How likely is it we'll lose water?
Um, Depends on what your margin is and how close you like to work. Is it absolutely necessary? No, I would not leave yourself with no water. Usually the guidance on filling up the tub is so you have that available for flushing and washing and those things, and then the bottled water you're keeping for drinking and cooking with. How likely is it? I mean, depends on who your utility provider is, 10,000 different things. I would say thankfully, although we've had some pretty significant impacts the last few years, they have not been as severe as they were in, say, like 2004 or those things. So
Mm.
I wouldn't, if it's reasonable and you can do that, I would encourage you to do that. Um, if you feel it's unlikely and unnecessary, we all have to make personal decisions on that, I guess.
I don't see any more questions. I think we're good to go. Anything else you'd like to add, Kenneth, before we wrap it up?
Just greatly appreciate everybody's time and being on here. I don't take that lightly. So great to do that. If there's follow-up conversations, you can reach out to me directly or to our department. Glad to work through those questions with you or try to get better answers than I was able to give on some of those today. And didn't want to be flippant about filling up your bathtub. I think that's a key question, but it's kind of like how much food to store. Sometimes it does come down to what you want your margin to be and what your risk tolerance is as an individual.
Well, thank you everybody for joining us for today's webinar, and thank you, Kenneth, for the information, for your time today. We really appreciate it.
Oh, good. Again, glad to do it. Appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good rest of your day.